Hi, so we're looking at Learning Outcome 3 for Equality and Diversity Unit. Now, the learning outcome is be able to promote equality and value diversity. So the assessment criteria within here are 3.1, use communication strategies to promote equality and diversity. 3.2, analyze how own behavior can impact on an organization's culture in relation to equality and diversity. And 3.3, explain how working with other agencies can promote diversity. Let's make our way to the PowerPoint. Now, in a nutshell, how can equality and diversity be promoted at school or in your educational setting? So when you're promoting equality and diversity, it's extremely essential that this is actually done for teachers, associate staff, trainers, lecturers, students, anyone that's within that environment. Now, the aim of trying to promote equality and diversity within a learning environment is to try and create a good classroom environment. So where all students can actually thrive together, that you can understand each person's individual characteristics, what makes people unique, and what makes them tick, but not pinpoint it in a negative way. Not to say that you're different, put a label on them, but just to embrace that diversity, embrace that uniqueness. So what we're going to do now in the following assessment criteria, we'll see how this can be promoted. So 3.1 is use communication strategies to promote equality and diversity. Now, there is a multitude of strategies that are available, and I'm going to pick out a few of them. To be honest, what you do in your environment, you probably have a lot of different strategies that you're using, and they can still be implemented into this. Now, one strategy is to use handouts or activity sheets. Now, within these handouts, make sure that you use plain and simple language. You use a picture, chart, or symbol, depending on what topic you're teaching, to really hone that information in. Ensure that they're easy to understand and that they've got simple text, so things like, a font on it. So Arial, Times New Roman, font size, say 12, or maybe slightly larger for somebody who might have a visual impairment. For students that have dyslexia, try to make sure that you're printing out your work on a yellow piece of paper. Now, I have a colleague who had a student that had dyslexia, and she recently told me that she ensured that everybody within the classroom actually got their handout on a yellow paper, so that she wasn't just pinpointed as being different. She wasn't the only person that, she wasn't feeling like she was being singled out. So to make sure that she was involved and to make sure that her inclusion and her diversity and equality were promoted, my colleague made sure that she put down every single person's work on a yellow handout, and it was fantastic. It's a great tool. With dyscalculia, where students will have issues with maths, now on here, rather than having 8 to 10 questions on one piece of paper, just make sure that there's only 4 or 5, so it's quite spaced out and it's easy for them to look at, and it's not information overload. Then you've got communication strategy for learners who are deaf or partially hearing. So you can use a lot of different technologies like text, email, you could use PowerPoint presentations. Make sure you've got handouts and paper resources. So if your student is deaf and you don't know sign language, maybe you could type out and print out what you're going to physically be saying during the lesson, or the gist of it, and have that piece of paper or the handout for that student. Make sure you're facing the student so that they can lip read. Use the hearing loop, and then speak clearly at a natural speed. You don't need to be shouting. It's not going to make them hear you better, but, try and be natural. Then you've got communication strategies for students or learners who have visual impairments. Now, there's a few simple steps that you can do here. You can get them to sit close to the front of the classroom or to the whiteboard, an interactive whiteboard. Give them worksheets that are in Braille. So if they're unable to see completely, they can have Braille worksheets. They can use a Braille typewriter so they can actually continue to do their work within the classroom as well. They can have one-to-one support, so maybe you have a member of staff that will sit next to them, and they could say verbally, so they can act as a scribe in a way. So your student could say what they want their answers to be, and the staff member could write it down for them. And then you can use software packages, so like voice recognition ones. I remember a student mentioned a voice recognition software called WorkDragon. So these things like these will help the students to complete their essays, their homework, with a lot more ease and a lot more independence as well, which is quite important. Then you've got strategies for learners that have dyslexia, dyscalculia, and dyspraxia. Now, dyslexia is where you're seeing the words, some words will be jumbled, so they look backwards. Dyscalculia is where it's the same thing with numbers. So some numbers will appear backwards to these students, so the wrong way around. And then you've got dyspraxia. This is where somebody is bumping into things, can be a little bit clumsy, can fall over consistently. So it's a development coordination disorder. And it just affects their physical coordination. Now, a few tips and strategies for this, for communication. Make sure that you're thinking holistically. So look at the whole picture. Don't just look at what you're working on. Look at your environment where you are. Now, students that have these learning difficulties, they're good at remembering patterns, but they find it difficult to understand the sequences. So a tip I would suggest for this is if I had a student who had dyslexia, dyscalculia, I would go to that student after I'd set everyone to work and actually sit down with them for a few minutes and actually work through a few of the topics or work through a few of the questions, just till you see that they're comfortable, and go from there. If you've got a member of staff that can sit one-to-one, that's even better. Now, these students will learn best from direct experience. So they're quite tactile learners. So if you've got something that you can actually get them to physically do, that will be much better. They also need to make personal connections to remember things, and they learn better if they have a personal interest in the subject matter. Now, I've noticed that students that may have dyslexia or dyscalculia, within the mainstream school system, they might have struggled a little bit. When they get onto college or university or further learning, they will do a lot better because they're choosing the topics they want to go in, they're choosing the field, and it really does make a big difference if there's a personal interest. And then use colourful sheets, have funny stories, have a bit of a laugh, use some images to reiterate what you're talking about. These are really good communication strategies. So we've got strategies for English as an additional language, so EAL. Now, there's a multitude of programs available, and these are only some of them here. So you've got programs like Welcome or Read Write Inc, and these are just software programs or programs that schools or teachers or trainers can go through, and they can teach English through here. They help you to assess what your student's ability is and how you need to go from there. You know, one-to-one sessions, interventions. Now, I know that these work a lot better as well because you're getting personalized attention for your student. You're getting a lot more comfortable. They're getting a lot more comfortable with you, and they're happy to actually verbalize what they're doing. They're happy to join in, and because they feel comfortable with you. Then you've got the picture exchange system. Now, this is used in a lot of industries where you can use like little flashcards or timetables or storyboards just to show what you're talking about. So if a student needs to go to the bathroom, maybe they have a little deck of cards that they can go through and show you the bathroom one. Or, you know, maybe you could create a picture timetable. Say, right now we're doing science, next is math, then it's break, and then we're going to have PE, then we'll have lunch, then we'll have reading time, and then it's home time. So for younger learners, that's a good way to go through. Translators are good. So if you've got somebody within your system that can translate, fantastic. Even asking other students to translate is a good idea if you've not got a member of staff that can. And then using symbols, charts, objects of reference is always a good thing. So if you're talking about maps and you can't explain what a map is, why don't you physically show one? So it does help. And then communicating with colleagues. Now, we actually forget about this section quite a lot. Now, communication strategies, when we think of that for equality and diversity, we always think of learners. But communicating within your colleague system and with your staff members, it really is important. So you should maintain a friendly but personal relationship with them. So it's okay to be talking about your family members or any problems or any issues that you might have, or if your child has done fantastic at the GCSE results or got a really good degree and they've gone into their career choice, you're very proud of them. That's fantastic. That's great. But they should be done in your spare time, in the staff room, at break time, at lunchtime, when you're away from the students, not in front of them. So make sure that you keep a professional relationship in your class environment and you don't bring your personal discussions in. Now, I know we're all human and it can be quite hard to keep your personal discussions out of work, especially when you know your students are sitting down, they're relaxing, they've got their work set on, you've got nothing to do at the moment, you're just waiting for them to complete the task. It's very tempting to go up to your colleague and start discussing things. Now, I've been guilty of that in the past as well, so I think it's human nature. We want to, we go towards each other and we want to talk, but try not to talk about personal things. Keep it professional. So make sure that you maintain respect and demonstrate appropriate behavior, especially when you're discussing your learners' needs with other professionals. Make sure it's in an area where students can't hear, you can't be overheard by colleagues who don't need to know the information. You'll get to know things like what special needs your students have, what medical or behavioural issues there might be. You might even get to know personal information about their family life. So you don't want to be passing that information on or letting somebody who doesn't need to hear it hear. Now, having these type of discussions is quite beneficial to your learners and their learning environment, because you can actually go ahead and discuss strategies and put down different ideas of what you can do. Now, I remember working one-to-one with a young child who had a brain injury. He had been playing over the summer. He wasn't wearing a helmet. He was riding a bike and he got knocked over. And the young boy, he was only 7 or 8 at the time. He went through horrific injuries. He was in hospital for a very long time. Luckily, he healed. Physically, he healed. But mentally, he had a lot of issues came up. It really altered his behavior, his personality. So I was working one-to-one with this young child, and in the beginning, it was quite a learning curve to what his triggers were, how he could, how I could support him. Sometimes he'd get antagonized by other students. So he was quite young at that time as well. Now, I remember a behavioral therapist came in, and it was a game changer for me. She came in, she worked with the student, she worked with me, and she gave me so many good tips about how I can manage his behavior, how I can, look at what his triggers might be, just get to recognize certain things that I didn't even know to look out for. So working with somebody can really help. So it could be another staff member, it could be a person from a different organization, but it really is beneficial. So again, any of these conversations that you're having, it has to be done appropriately. You shouldn't use unsavory or derogatory language when you're discussing a learner's need. It's disrespectful and it can change somebody else's attitude towards that learner. So I could come to you and I could say certain things about learner X, oh, he's very difficult, or she likes to bite, or he likes to kick, or whenever you're doing work, they just won't listen, they'll start crying, or they're quite unreasonable. So I could say any of these things. And it's disrespectful what I'm saying, isn't it? It's not something I should be going. I should say that this student has a difficult time doing this, that, or the other. I need to support them in this way because it will help you. Because whoever I've talked to about those points that I've passed on, they're going to actually get a preconceived notion about the student, and they're going to go in negatively. They're going to think, oh, goodness sake, I've got to handle this person now. I've got to go and help this learner or this child. So it's very unprofessional. So I've got some tips for AC 3.1. So if you have done Unit 1, you can cross-refer some of this to Unit 1, Learning Outcome for AC 4.1. So the section there you would have worked on about communication with your students and how to promote equality and diversity. Now, go back, check that, see how it is, but you'll still need to add a little bit more on. If you haven't done Unit 1, that's okay. We can go on here. So on this section, I'd like you to include some communication strategies for different types of learners and colleagues, to talk about learners that have hearing impairments, visual impairments, English as an additional language, dyslexia, dyscalculia, dyspraxia. So have a section on each one and just talk about how you'd communicate with them, what sort of points you would do. And then, to top it off, include an example of a time you used different communication strategies to support your learners. So, for example, if you have a non-verbal student, you could use the PECS, the Picture Exchange Communication System. You might use signs, symbols, you might use a picture timetable, you might even use expressions to communicate that you're happy or you're sad or you're very excited, any of those things. So make sure you put a detailed example in, pinpointing how you actually communicate and what strategies you use. So on to 3.2. This is analyze how own behavior can impact on an organization's culture in relation to equality and diversity. Now, this is quite an important one, I believe. It really has an impact on your own organization. So we've got things within our settings, whatever environment you're working in. So you'll have a code of conduct and you'll have dress code policies. And these really are there to help you, give you a guideline of what is and what is not acceptable. So if I rock up to school with a pair of trainers and short shorts and a top that's gaping and you can see with a very low neckline, it's not acceptable. It's not professional. I'm not going clubbing. I'm not going partying. I'm going into work. So I shouldn't be coming up with tiny shorts or a big low neckline. I shouldn't be coming in with trainers. I mean, there's some places that say jeans are not acceptable for work as well. So if we talk about a traditional school environment, you have where in the dress code policies that I've seen and I've been part of, closed-toed shoes, not open-toed, no sandals, either wear a long dress, don't wear leggings and a high t-shirt. That's not acceptable, but you can have leggings with a long dress, or you can wear trousers and a shirt, as long as you're covered and you're looking professional. So acting as a role model, so behave in a certain way, be respectful, use good language, good expressions, and be friendly, and demonstrate good behavior. Now, this will be acting as a role model towards your students, towards your colleagues, towards associate staff, anybody that is within your environment. There could be somebody from the head of management to the CEO. It could be a person that comes in and does cleaning or is lunchtime staff. Regardless, you need to behave in a certain way and show everybody the respect. Everybody is equal regardless of what position they're in, and show them the respect that they deserve. And believe me, they do. It's not something that you would say, oh, you work as a cleaner, I'm in a better position than you, I'm going to look down on you. Because it's not done. So again, demonstrate good behavior. Look out for the well-being of staff and learners. So I remember working with a young lady who had chronic back problems. Now, she gave me a shout once. She was helping a young child get changed who had soiled herself. But because she's got chronic back problems, she wasn't able to bend down and get her dressed. So she gave me a shout while I was walking past. And she said, Afsha, could you come in and give me a hand? And I went in and it helped the young child get changed and do the things that my colleague couldn't do. And it really cut down on her time. We were both able to help the child get cleaned up into a new uniform within 10 minutes, but on her own, she would have been struggling for a lot longer. So if you notice that somebody has particular issues or particular problems, even if it means doing something simple as taking a message to someone or picking up something that they may have dropped, just give them a hand. It only takes a couple of extra seconds, and believe me, they will be so grateful that you're looking out for them. Then also promote advocacy for your learners. Help your students to access the curriculum in a differentiated way. Change the curriculum for them, differentiate it, make sure that you're giving them work that they can actually do and is not going to go over their heads, and that you're splitting the information up as necessary. You could do simple things like use sign language, or you could teach somebody, a child, how to use a pair of scissors, or a student who may have motor difficulties to cut through their own work, support them, encourage them to do it, and ultimately be there for them to fall back on and say, if you get stuck, just try yourself first. If you really do get stuck and you feel you need my help, I'm right here and I will help you. Again, intervene on behalf of the students. If you notice that other staff or students are being too abrupt, then just, if they're talking too aggressively or being impatient with them, just stick up and, respectfully stick up for that person. And your personal appearance, especially in and out of school. Now, I work in an area where I live. Now, I've worked in the schools in and around my area for a number of years, and they're both within 2 or 3 minute walk from my house, so very close. I shop in this area, I live in this area, I see all the students in this area, so it really matters about your personal appearance, not just in the school, but out of the school. So make sure you're dressed appropriately, that you've got neat hair, that you're tidy, your clothes are clean and pressed, using good languages, and you're not using horrible derogatory terms. That you've got open body language, so when you do see a student, that you don't just cower away and put your eyes down and ignore them and walk away. Just even give them a little wave and a hello, especially with the younger learners. They really love the attention. Now, tips for AC 3.2. Here, you need to analyze your own behavior. Not behavior in general, but your own. It's got to be personalized. And look at how it impacts on your learners and colleagues. So what do you do? How do you behave? How do you portray yourself? So think of those points. And then think about how you promote the following. How do you promote advocacy? How do you promote behavior? How do you promote well-being? And then you can put a couple of little examples in each one. So what do you do to promote advocacy? What do you do to promote behavior? And what do you do to promote well-being of others? Now the last section is 3.3. Explain how working with other agencies can promote diversity. So there's a lot of agencies that an educational or a training organization will work with, and this is just a few of them. Social services, community nurses, dentists. Dentists especially come into early years settings where they'll give out free toothbrushes and toothpaste and just show how teeth should be brushed, just teaches little children. GPs, police, educational psychologists, speech and language therapists also. So when you're working with these specialists like nurses, social care, speech and language therapists, they are actually there to ensure that learners have the best access to the national curriculum. They're also there to give you tips and techniques and personalized strategies that you can use to support your students. They'll give you background information if they're within social care, so you know what you should be pointing out, what you shouldn't. It's a multitude and a big bank of information that is really beneficial to you, so that you can actually use that to personalize your work, your strategies, the way you communicate with these students. When this is happening, students will be feeling more involved, they'll be engaged within the learning process, and they'll be able to access their work in accordance to their own level of learning. Now, these external agencies, like I mentioned earlier when I worked with a behavioral psychologist, she really helped me to hone my the way I work and the way I supported the child I was working with one-to-one. So these external agencies will really help you to meet your students' needs and adapt and work with them in an environment that suits their needs. So you can also access different strategies like behavior management. You'll be able to get support, advice and training. You might be able to have a specialist coming in to teach you sign language or how to read and write Braille so that you can support your learners. So on all of these points with these external agencies and their help and their assistance when you're working together, it'll enable your staff members, teachers, trainers, associate staff to create a consistent level of support. So the learners will actually be familiar because they've got a consistency across all boards. So if there's a child that might be going in for, or a learner who's going in for physiotherapy and they're doing certain exercises within those appointments, when they come back into school, you can actually carry on with the same exercises and the same treatment because you would have been working with the physiotherapist anyway. So you're supporting that young person's physical needs and the learning needs all in one. So tips to answer AC 3.3. So here you need to identify the different agencies that you work with or you could possibly work with, and then explain how you promote diversity within your organization. So how do these agencies support you with different strategies, with training, with behavior management tricks and techniques and tricks, and how does this help you to promote diversity? Does it help you to make the students more involved? Are you keeping up with their needs? Are you able to adapt their learning environment? Are you bringing in specialized resources like left-handed scissors or low-level tables or a Braille typewriter or learning how to do sign language? What do they help you to do? And again, to top it all off, how has this helped you to support your learners? So give me an example of how this helped you to support your learners. So today we've looked at different communication strategies to promote equality and diversity, analyzed how your own behavior can impact on an organization's culture in relation to equality and diversity. And you see I've made your own bold here because it's important that you focus on it being your own. Don't talk about generalized behavior of people. Make sure you personalize it to yourself. And then we've also looked at how other agencies can promote diversity. So thank you very much for joining me, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.